Welcome everybody for the first lecture of the new series of KASKlezingen. In the coming months, we will invite as a guest Anne Duki-Jordan. This is next week. Then we have Bianca Baldi, we have Gert Verhoeven, we have Lily van der Stokker, Marlie Mul, and we end the 20th of May with Jacqueline de Jong. So we start online, but of course we really hope, as probably you all do, that the following lectures can take place offline in real life, or at least maybe for a small group in real life. Since it won't be possible for everyone to travel, there will be live screenings all the time. So also if you have the lecture offline, so to say, there will also be an online presence. So let's talk about our first guest of tonight, or of this series, which is Makhacheva, as you probably already knew. I guess a lot of you already knew or know her practice, but for those who don't really know her practice, I'm sure you will learn more about it tonight. But as an introduction, I will say that she often works with others and bringing together different personalities and worlds. It's a search for how culture or civilization is created and what happens when traditions come into contact with each other. In many cases, research starts with art history, but without focusing on a particular canon, period, or geographical place. You might have seen some of her works in recent exhibitions nearby, for example at Muka or the Van Abbe in Eindhoven, who have works of her in their collections, but maybe also on biennials like the Lyon Biennial, the biennial we visited with our students 2 years ago. And for those who were there, I'm sure you remember the work Aerostatic Experience, a big air balloon hanging in the main hall. And I believe this work can be seen as archetypical for her practice, where it's a humorous, poetic and critical view on contemporary society, history writing and gender issues. So the work was created with more than 150 people, people who lived in Lyon, and using as a starting point the hot air balloon Le Flezelle, which made its first and only flight in Lyon in 1784. And inspired by the learning methods of the costume design students at the Lycée Le Martinière Diderot, also in Lyon, Taus brings together myths, people and efforts to create this work, or maybe better, to create new stories, myths and histories. I'm not sure if Taus will discuss this work as well, but in this lecture she will discuss different recent works of her, actually her whole practice. So of course it doesn't really make sense for me to go too deep in this work. Only one practical note. After the lecture there will be the possibility to ask questions. So people who join us here on Zoom, they can ask questions in the Q&A section. And people who join us on YouTube or Facebook, they can ask the questions in the comment section. And these questions will also be answered here. So that's it for me. Then I will give the words to Taus. Taus, very welcome. And we are very happy having you here.
Hi, first of all, Godard, thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to share methodologies with my fellow colleagues. So I hope it will be interesting and useful, whatever I'm planning to talk about. And yes, I'll talk about aerostatic experiences. So we're aiming for an hour and a half. I'll sort of go in depth into the practice. And I usually enjoy artist talks that focus on how artists arrive to a certain decision or to a certain work or to a certain form. And this is how I've decided to structure my own talks usually. And it's also nice to hear that Anne and Bianca, who I know also quite well and have shown with before, and actually with Bianca were the Jan van Eyck, are going to be also part of the series. So let's start the screen share. Mm-hmm. Okay, So we have a work. This is a work that I've just completed recently as a commission for France Massereal Centrum. And it's a work for a program called Solitude, and Stijan contacted me in, I think, this autumn, and he was saying that he said that they're preparing this program, which is about how to encounter an artwork face to face, not through screen. So not about loneliness, but sort of solitude and possibility to have something at home, to order something and have that encounter. One of the works one of the artists that he quoted that is taking part was Nora Turato, and she proposed to do a puzzle. And also part of the project was that the works don't cost as artist puzzles, but like, for example, Nora's puzzle costs as much as a standard puzzle. So this was also kind of, because I guess the center focuses on, kind of doesn't focus on commercial aspect, but just kind of disseminating ideas, and that being sort of the primary thing. So I've done this work with a studio called Mineral Weather, and they're super nice jewelry makers in Moscow. And I call it, part sarcastically, Instagram research, because I've been obsessing over jewelry for the past, I don't know, year. And I've been also thinking about what are the skills, narratives, sensibilities that we need now in this moment and we might need in the future. So in the end, the work became this tiny traveling museum, in a way, tiny museum that you can order to have for yourself, and basically like a jewelry piece. But I don't even refer to it as jewelry, I refer to it as body-oriented artifacts. And that's actually borrowed from an article by my mother, Patsimat Gamzatova, who's an art historian, who wrote a lot on traditional jewelry and their capabilities to structure something, structure the body, structure you socially, structure you within the society in a certain way, like, I don't know, manifest your status, manifest your emotional state in a way, like, I don't know, you would, for example, like in Dagestan, you would remove one, it's not even an earring, it's a thing you attach to a headscarf of sorts called chokhto, and you remove one if your husband dies and you're mourning. So kind of they manifest different, I guess, types and states of your body, and that's why I like the name much more. And every pendant in this set is dedicated to a different skill or sensibility. And for example, one is dedicated to morphic resonance. And you see this kind of glass bowl with a little compass inside. And an idea of morphic resonance is borrowed from Rupert Sheldrake's work, who talked about morphic resonance that birds have, basically. I think he possibly invented the term, but don't quote me on that. I need to double check that. But he basically wrote a book on it, and of how they have this inherent knowledge of where to fly, where to go, where to where to go die or give birth. So something that would be we would need and would be nice to have this internal sense of direction. And you can also open it and look at this sort of very spiky star and perhaps, in my imagination, choose a direction yourself when you open it. There's another pendant in the shape of a black porcelain walnut. And this is actually, you can see in the box, it's enclosed in a small plastic bag at the top within a caramel. So in order to get to this pendant, you have to suck on it and dissolve the caramel and then sort of experience the pendant with your mouth. And here I should also mention an artist, Gaia Fugazi, also sort of a friend of mine, and she has these beautiful porcelain sculptures for mouths, which you have to experience through your mouths. And I really kind of love this idea within her work. Another thing is, for example, these two nuggets on the chain, and they're called syncochord nuggets. And it's basically to manifest this idea or term, which my friend told me about, which is called steam engine effect from cyberfeminism. In other spheres, there's also a similar term, like, for example, accidental plagiarism. And it's basically when somebody in the world, and I don't know, perhaps you have the same idea and realize the same idea without knowing it. And I think kind of as artists, we all know this very clearly when kind of you suddenly realize that somebody did the same thing that you have just have thought about. And it's just this kind of, I don't know, this ability to sense the time, feel the time, and basically there are terms for that. So it's this play on that coincidental and coinciding plug-in into the world, or coincidental plagiarism. And obviously you can never have like completely identical nuggets. Then there's a pendant called fiber resilience shell, and it's basically dedicated to the plasticity of our mind. Like, for example, if you lose sight, your hearing increases. So it's the same thing. It's sort of like how our mind balances things out. And we've taken like, I don't know, a clam shape as a reference, or like just kind of a shell, because pearls, the way pearls are formed, it's basically a small, I don't know, bit of sand or an irritant that gets into a little sort of shell, and the shell covers it with pearly layers because it doesn't want to be irritated. So basically it's just reworking the irritant into something very beautiful, remaking it and finding a generative approach to things. So kind of something like that. And then another on top, the square thing, this pendant, it has an imprint of a cholesterol benzoate crystal that you see under the microscope. And this pendant is dedicated to something that we've sort of came up with or dreamt about, called remote synesthesia, based on the mirror synesthesia, which is kind of when you see someone being hurt, you feel that pain. And remote synesthesia would kind of work just in distance with different people. So all of this, the whole set is about kind of, I don't know, increased empathy, feeling what the world is feeling, being aware of what other people are feeling, some sort of set for the future or for the present. And also maybe another thing, because it's very important for me to understand how the works should function. So with this work, it's unsigned, unlimited numbered edition, because we wanted to avoid this thing of, kind of potentially a collector buying the whole 50 produced, and then kind of sitting on it and waiting for the price to increase. And that's why, and we wanted to make it affordable, so basically like it sold practically at its production price, which wasn't small, but it is quite a production price. But we will make more once these get sold, because we want it to be accessible and to avoid a life within the market rules. It doesn't mean that I don't live within the market rules, I do, but with this work I wanted to just try something different. And I think the center wanted to try something different, allow me to try something different. This work was made for Musée Cantonal des Beaux-Arts in Lausanne, and it's called 4,224 square centimeters of Degas. And it's basically a work dedicated to a finding of a curator at the museum, Camille, who told me that he discovered that there were pieces of a pastel by Degas missing. So a pastel, washerwoman and a horse. He compared the one that they have in the museum and with the catalogue raisonné, which was published after the death of the artist, and there were several strips missing. And I just became so fascinated with that idea, like, who would cut it off? How much does the square centimeter of Degas worth? What is this action actually? And that I basically couldn't stop thinking about it. So the whole installation grew out of that encounter, because that's also how I very often start my works. I don't know, I go around the museum, I talk to conservators, architects, people who build it, and curators, and just kind of try to find something that I can't forget. And that's how usually the work sort of develops and evolves. The soft sort of sculptures that you see, I see them as some sort of maybe ruins, maybe melted walls of the museum, and they are hand embroidered. And the embroideries, they basically tell stories of how different artworks ended up in the museum. in this museum and other museums around the world. Like there are phrases like gift of the princess, or this work was gifted to the wife of Winston Churchill when he visited Lausanne, which is kind of true. And then there are works, this work was donated by the family in return for storing their collection for during Second World War. So it's like, it's stories about provenance, but also invisible stories, because I don't know, I'm not sure in Europe, but like, for example, one museum in Russia that I encountered, they're very attentive when they place a caption next to the work when it's donated by somebody, by like a patron, but when it's a donation by an artist, it rarely mentions that. I mean, it is changing. All the practices and all the ethics and all the kind of the I guess the attention to provenance is like becoming something else now, which is kind of really brilliant to see. And on the floor, there are confettis, because I obviously love duplicating work and cutting works up. Are confetti made from duplicated work from the museum's collection of the most expensive and sort of the less valuable ones that are mixed in, and you can pick them up. Because also one of the things, the museum was moving into a new building when I was invited, and I was invited to do something in relation to that move. So I, just one second. I asked also about different fears that people had in the museum. And one of the things was that I imagined what happens if an explosion happens in the storage. What would that be? How would you identify the value of the works? Because I throughout my practice, I'm very much interested in how the value of the artworks is formed. And also another thing, the museum is built right next to the train station and like right next to the train track. And the building is built to withstand an explosion of a train carriage filled with like petrol. And I found this very curious, that kind of you keep that in mind building a museum, and then I transferred that explosion into the storage and what happens then. And there are two more elements in the work. One was an audio piece, and you can see actually Nicole Schweizer here, who was a curator and who invited me, posing for us as a model. So you kind of put your head through this mattress, or it can be a ceiling of the museum, because I think a lot of my works are about, I don't know, entering ceilings, walls, scraping things, analyzing what you scraped off. And you hear in that speaker a sound, and I'm going to play it for you. So it's basically a sound similar to termites, water, or fire, perhaps. And this is basically one of the fears that collection keepers have. That's why they didn't even bring any old plinths from the museum, because they were really afraid of bugs. So it's kind of this, like, enter through the wall, hear this. And then there was a text piece written by a writer of about 30 minutes long, and we'll listen to one story from that piece.
Let us imagine a wholly speculative price of 8 million in an unspecified currency for a pastel whose size makes up 84.2 by 107.4 centimeters, no less speculative and made up than the concocted notional prices of any work that rise and fall in the whim of collectors and dealers, on supply and demand, on changing notions of good taste, and on those elusive marks of genius. Let us also imagine that this pastel existed at the size of 107 by 124 centimeters, as this work once did, before an act of diminution took place for reasons unknown. According to cold hard logic, if 84.2 by 107.4 is 9,043.08 centimeters squared at the value of 8 million, then each centimeter squared is 885, again, in an unspecified currency. We may suppose then that if 107 by 124 is 13,368 centimeters squared, the value of this surface area, as it once was, is 11,826,059, with the cutaway piece worth 3,826,059 alone. It is only logical to reason that a larger work, like a house with more rooms, will be worth more than its shrunken counterpart. Yet opening page 920 of that infamous Encyclopedia of Art, the one that starts in Greece and ends in France, will inform us that the zoomed-in composition, the crop and the fragment, supposedly inspired by compositions of Japanese prints and Mannerist paintings, became a hallmark for Degas, evidenced in his works by our uncomfortable closeness to orchestra pits and horses, and by the cropped lean form of Janil Alavi, as well as by the bottom halves of ballerinas. We must suppose then, contrary to all logic, that the work is at its most precious in its shrunken state, when it conforms to assumptions of Degas' greatness, and that 4,224.92 centimeters squared of Degas are worth even less than nothing.
Another work is called Seismic Jitters, and it was commissioned for Lahore. And I came for a research visit for about 2 weeks. And the main sort of feeling that I left with was that a lot of the architecture, a lot of the places are kind of silent witnesses to history, silent witnesses to things being repainted, things being, I don't know, violated, people being violated, cavities, things being, kind of, I don't know, stolen from walls. And I wanted to work with brass, and I wanted to work kind of with something shiny. To try. And I think the actual space was calling for it. So we've done these little sculptures that can be called that way, I guess, which were exhibited on these super thin plinths, and which would shake when you touch them. And I think maybe another important thing was that at the time I was thinking, I called it seismic jitters because I felt that we were living in a state of one or two level sort of seismic activity or earthquake, that we don't feel it consciously, but we feel it bodily all the time. And kind of you're looking at what to grab onto, but you can't find it. So kind of, I think the work became about this uncertainty in a way as well. And at the center of this image, you see, I'm sure you know this famous story of this diamond, Kohinoor, which was taken away by the British from Pakistan and recut, and is now in the British Crown. And when it was recut, it lost 40% of its volume. So we've sort of reconstructed the original cut of it and hollowed it out and built this, I don't know, strange coral from it. So it's this negative lost space from an abducted jewel, one can say. And you can see, I don't know, some of these little things are actually copies of parts of the walls that I saw in the Summer Palace. Some of them kind of are more elaborate fantasies of that witnessing and things being crudely put together and held together. Or maybe kind of just a fabric cavity where something was stolen from with some sort of gentleness. And this is just to demonstrate how the plinths shook if touched. Because also I was thinking about the material relationship of local people with things, because it was exhibited in the Summer Palace, and there are at Lahore Fort, and there's crazy flow of tourists. And obviously it wasn't for the biennial, but they kind of went through the biennial. And I thought about that, and I wanted them to touch it. I wanted it to shake. And also we've threw around space little sort of nuggets of brass as well, just to kind of emphasize this golden rush, this palatial golden rush, and for people to pick it up. There was also an audio piece playing for about 25 minutes in the space, and also kind of the strange fantasy of, for example, one man conversation with his psychoanalyst about his dream that he was an elephant living in that palace, walking on the elephant steps, but then became a woman, then became, and these were like sort of historical narratives weaved in. And there was a story about this diamond, which was narrated from the perspective of the diamond. But we won't listen to it now. And this is the work which I did together with my partner, Sabi Ahmed, who's a writer and a curator, and it was called Superhero Sighting Society. I have an alter ego called Super Taos. She's a superhero. And I was invited initially to do just a show dedicated to her at Caddis Foundation. But I wanted to, for a while, I didn't want it to be just her. I wanted kind of to have a wider network of superheroes. And we've also wanted to do for a while a superhero summit. So it became a two-part thing. We did a superhero summit with I don't know, other artists, superheroes making presentations, and different thinkers also presenting, and a game designer. I mean, yeah, for 2 days, and then an exhibition. And for the exhibition, we basically formed temporarily this society. And we didn't want to historicize it too much because, I mean, some artists are into kind of, you know, discovering a society or kind of creating a large fictional society. But for us, it was just something that was formed in 2019. And we've been collecting witness accounts. So we were collecting witness accounts of different superheroes, but we weren't interested in, you know, kind of American superheroes that would embody a country and, you know, this hypermasculinity or of sorts. We were interested in tiny figures like Super Taos, or for example, like Super Sohrab. This is a superhero from Iran who doesn't have any superpowers, but basically redefines masculinity by his own existence. And this is basically how Super Taos came into being, because I just met Super Sohrab and I was so fascinated because, you know, it's a guy, Sohrab Kashani, he's a curator, an artist. He wears this superhero costumes and, you know, sometimes fails, sometimes succeeds. But I thought it was a very kind of powerful gesture, which I also appropriated. And so we've picked about 30 different heroes, and we worked with a writer, Jessica Sagsby, who wrote stories about these heroes. So we fictionalized it even more. No, actually, we fictionalized it because the original heroes, they weren't fictional, they were real. Well, as real as they can be. Like, for example, one of my favorites is a Carrier Pram Ranger from Japan. And it's a guy that wears a ranger costume and helps people to carry their prams up the stairs in one particular metro station in Tokyo. And we've written a story from a perspective of a costume shop, rental shop owner in Tokyo. And kind of the story was like, you know, I got this costume, I cleaned it up, and I thought nobody would want it. But then a guy came in, he bought it, and I thought, oh my God, he's probably going to rob a bank. I need to kind of remember him so I can identify him later. And then I saw him at the train station, at the metro station, doing what he was doing. And I decided to submit a witness account to your superhero sighting society. So there are figures like that. And they were in the audio piece. So there was a 5-channel audio installation with, I don't know, maybe 12 different languages. I can't be too exact now. So there was Japanese, Urdu, French, Chinese, Russian. That would be these, you know, one was like a radio grab from like emergency services radio saying that Super Taos is holding a rock so it doesn't like destroy a village underneath. Another one was, you know, a WhatsApp conversation between 2 people that we got hold of. And the scenography, it was commissioned to Super Taos, which who proposed to do these objects, which are unclimbed mountains. And alpine climbers call them last greatest problems. I myself was quite surprised. There are unclimbed mountains, but also kind of maybe even in a good way. Because the whole thing was about building a landscape. The whole project was about building a landscape and a world from these tiny figures around the world. So that's why kind of landscape scenography made sense. This is a work called Charivari, which was on our poster. And it was commissioned by Yarat in Baku. And I've been fascinated with the circus for quite a while now. I mean, it sort of came through in Tightrope, in several other spaces, and it had an enormous space, as you can see. And I've never worked on such a scale, so I was quite curious how to work with it. And I wanted to create some sort of a carcass or bones or imaginary circus or a drawing of a circus. And this is basically, I guess, what you're seeing right now. And the work had 3 elements. The work had an installation that it had a set of costumes which were unwearable. And it also had an audio piece written by Alexander Snigiryov, which were 10 different novellas about the circus, I guess, of the future, or of an imaginary circus, because I also wanted to try a work that would let the viewer imagine more things happening, and not, for example, relying too much on body performers. And the way we worked, my studio director, Christina, she went to Baku at the time because I was doing Superhero Sighting Society. So this is my favorite part, but I couldn't go research. And then she interviewed a director of the circus, deputy director of the circus, gymnasts, clownists, and also worked with Baku State Archive to get photos of the Baku circus. And for example, some of the things you see, the objects, are copies from the archive of the circus, of the props that they had. Some of them we've imagined with our architect Marina Sirova. Some of them, are basically exact copies. So it's a collection of things. And this is just a 3D of when we, how we proposed it. And that's a photo from the Baku archive. I love this sort of animal-friendly circus. And this is also how it started, I guess, from the figures on the right. It's Nazirov's gymnast family and from actually Azerbaijan. And I saw them in the film called National Circuses from 1967. And I was mesmerized because, there was like a group from Azerbaijan, a group from Dagestan, which were tightrope walkers, I don't know, a clown from Uzbekistan. So I guess it lingered from the time I was doing research for tightrope, which was like 2015, 2014. And I think it's also important for me, it's important to see how things, make a way back into the practice as a current, undercurrent, or kind of, or another layer. We worked with Pani Kazirevya, our favorite costume designer, which we work with quite often. So we worked on these figures that inhabited the circus, like a gymnast, or I guess this guy, I called him a disco ball man, but he's also very much relates to space programs, because in the Soviet circus, there were a lot of programs or script scenarios dedicated to space travel. And space programs, a clown, strong man, master of the ceremony. And for example, master of the ceremony costumes, it was all done a bit like a Lego, like a constructor. There were like buttons everywhere. So you could kind of, I don't know, all the hands, all the sleeves were separate, all the pants. And it was very much like a constructor because the figure is very much like a constructor. This woman I call Animal Tailor or a Curtain Woman, well, in private. And this is a tightrope walker. And here they are in the space. And we will listen to a short excerpt from the audio, so you, I guess, get the idea of the dreaminess of the stories that occupied and that sounded in the space.
Dear friends, we extend to you our very warmest welcome. A whole host of maestros of the circus arts will be taking part in our festive carnival and circus performance. All will be costumed accordingly and will perform alongside trained animals. You will witness the extremes of human ability, violations of the laws of gravity, and transgressions of accepted ethical norms. You will hear sparkling, unforgettable dialogues between man and beast and man. Parading before you first will be dozens of athletes, stunt motorcyclists with banners flying, followed on the backs of bowed acrobats by plastic lion tamers, keeping their charges on a short leash. Approaching the royal box, they will hand floral bouquets to the respected elders and prominent spectators. Emerging next onto the arena will be pyramids of inflatable elephants. Standing on them, hippos. Standing on them, poodles. And on them, a giraffe. Once they leave the arena, numerous inflatable flamingos half filled with brandy will be released into the sky. All this will no doubt be rapturously received by the visiting public. Musical accompaniment will be provided by brass fanfares and a group of harpists. The creative abilities of the trumpeters and harpers will be warmly received by the audience. Then, mobile platforms will be rolled into the arena, adorned with garlands of fresh flowers, lettuce, coriander, parsley, and trained Baku tomatoes, as well as sturgeon caviar. If you've never heard of such tomatoes before, you soon will. As you all know, the main property of Baku tomatoes is to disappear. They can disappear better than anyone else. No magician can rival them. Here they are, and then you look again, and poof, they're gone. Only sturgeon caviar can be compared with them when it comes to the mastery of vanishing acts, due to its similar talent for instantly dissolving into space. Our trainers have achieved amazing results with Baku tomatoes and sturgeon caviar. Not only do they disappear now, they've reached a point where they don't even appear in the first place. Nobody except these trainers has ever even seen a tomato with caviar. The axles and all moving parts of the floats will be smeared with crude oil to avoid squeaking. Special sprinklers will spray a mist of pomegranate juice in all directions. A very healthy natural beverage, saturated with vitamins A, B, C, and E, and rich in iron, calcium, potassium, phosphorus, and magnesium, as well as folic acid and antioxidants. All this will surely be greeted with great enthusiasm by the visiting public. The audience will be presented with acts performed by synthetic bears, a talking horse, a lion ventriloquist, a touchy sheep, a strong woman accountant, 2 elephants, and 1 big top king pole. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, on with the show.
So it's, I guess it's this imaginary world, but you hear also kind of unpacking of a certain geography in a way, like kind of trained Baku tomatoes, because they are considered the best, like in Russia. That's why they disappear so quickly. I mean, kind of some sort of commentary on the way resources disappear, the crude oil smearing. So it's, in a way, it's an imaginary circus, but also kind of it tackles the contemporary in different ways. Like, for example, one of the stories is dedicated to circus canteen, where everything is made from crude oil, like mousse or sugarcane or from crude oil that you can also take away and apply as a face mask. And basically when I started, I was researching cosmetics made from crude oil, kind of the fact that it's so rich with, I don't know, some type of proteins. So potentially we will eat it at some point, but who knows? And then there are, basically there are layers of different stories. There's a story on VR circus where you can become an animal, a human. There's a story about animals training humans, kind of different types of reversals of the circus. This is the work that we've mentioned before, the Static Experience, which is actually now being hung at the Frieze Museum in Leeuwarden. I don't know if it will open. I mean, I haven't heard anything about delays or cancellations. I think there'll be an online opening on the 27th of March, but the show will be on for 12 months, which is amazing. And they're brought Charivari too. So like, this is really rare that such large works get to travel, because everybody's trying, like all the institutions are trying to save budget on shipments. And I mean, we're quite used to that also. That's why sometimes, you know, I call it this art mule agency, when we just kind of bring things in extra luggage. So it started off with me being fascinated with the way students in Lycée Marcel Diderot study, because I was really amazed of how it's basically time traveling through skill and sort of, I guess, storytelling through fabric and through shapes that you make with the fabric. Because I don't know, they can be making one day a 13th century collar, another week they're making a skirt from 1860. And they all these things they do with one type of fabric, this like creamy color. And when we're researching, I mean, we looked at different things. We looked at Jacques Chenet, actually, which I'm still quite very fascinated about, this amazing puppeteer and puppet maker And the museum, the puppet museum in Lyon, has an amazing collection by him. So we're thinking in that direction. I kind of looked at the silks. I mean, it is France, but then in the end, I got stuck on crinolines and hot air balloons. So I didn't go very far from the Frenchness of it. And I've also, when I kind of started being interested in these historical structures, I found an account of a woman who was citing in I think National Library in Paris, that said that when crinolines were invented, it was really amazing because they were much lighter structures for sort of skirts, as opposed to 20 layers that you would have to wear before. And also they protected her personal space from different sort of sexual assaults or, I don't know, interests, let's put it that way. I never thought about these dresses, but I guess that's my ignorance, as something that would define your space and be a protective presence around you. I thought it's like, oh, so uncomfortable, such a horrible treatment, and limitation, so anti-feminist, and so on and so on. But here there was a very different angle, and which influenced the work a lot, and it became this. This is the making of it with the students from the lycée, and it's 150 people were at the hot air balloon flight, so that's a historic number. The making, I think it was about maybe 12 students with Noémie Edel, who led the whole production process at the lycée. And in a way, once it's hung, it is like a giant skirt structure in a way, composed of different support structures for female skirts that hangs there and defines the space in a way. This is a work called Quantitative Infinity of the Objective, and it started off with my interest in outdoor gyms and physical culture in schools. I guess, I suppose, since I'm a Soviet child, in Soviet schools as well. And also different types of oppressive language that is sometimes used in society, in institutions, in educational institutions, in work, I guess used to be used more, work environments and families. And the work was basically these exercise machines, and we've taken the machines that could be used in schools, in your physical culture classes, but also that became Olympic sports. And we modified all of them, like for example, parallel bars are not really parallel. This, I forgot how to say it in English. This, we say goat in Russian, basically this guy. Much longer than needed. Like everything is distorted. Perhaps like our kind of, I guess, psyche gets distorted with that language. And sometimes the reference was sometimes these outdoor gyms. Well, I guess in Dagestan was sort of this fountains of masculinity gets bent. And I really like this sort of, I guess, gesture of bending the unbendable. And there were performers from a really amazing group in Kiev, and a 6-channel audio of that language that I've just cited. And we'll just watch a short excerpt so we understand. But it's this basically, it's, you're a girl, you're a boy, boys don't cry, or you shouldn't wear short skirts like that with legs like that. You'll grow up and then you'll know, why can't you get it on your own? And kind of all these things that keep sort of, I don't know, reverberating in our minds much later too. And I guess the body was this flexible body that is able to withstand, that is able to grow over that language. So in a way also, after the work was performed twice, the performers were called Apache Crew. Yes, sorry, I forgot. After the work were performed twice, I felt that without the performance, it became very heavy and very dark. So for a third iteration, which we did for Yokohama Triennial, we added posters, and I'll show them to you later. This is the second iteration, which was presented in Venice.
Ride your tongue.
Why are you riding me up?
What for?
Because you're the eldest. Because you're a girl.
I'm so disappointed in you.
Because I said so.
You only ever think about yourself.
What do you want from me at all?
What do you think that behavior is going to achieve?
I don't care.
It'll all work out if you just listen to your mother.
When I was your age.
It's too early for you to think about having kids.
You'll have plenty of time to get married later on.
You'll see once you've had a baby of your own.
You think you're all grown up, do you?
You can't make a single decision for yourself.
Think for yourself.
And if they jumped off the roof, would you do that too?
Be more like,
Be more like.
Be more like,
I've had enough of you.
Being great.
You don't appreciate what you've got.
And for Yokohama, we did different costumes. And I feel like every time we show the work, it changes, it adapts to conversations, because also it was like a long distance rehearsals with Alexander Sachivko, our choreographer from Apache Crew. And actually in Yokohama, we worked with gymnasts, not with dancers. And then amazing, amazing illustrations, I mean, in my mind, in my opinion, were made by Charolta Santa, this illustrator, which were always in the space and which provided that also optimistic tune of a body that is capable, that is able. And yeah, you see the illustrations here. This is a work that was commissioned for Riga Biennial called Dear R KSMA and so on. And basically it was a hall filled with portable speakers that you sometimes carry with you in order to feel grounded. Like if you kind of, I guess, live in the art world and travel a lot or used to travel a lot. And they are standing on sculptural tripods because I wanted to imply the flexibility and the possibility of movement, but then kind of steal it from the experience of the installation. And as you walk around, you hear different first lines from emails, second lines from emails, but I'll switch on an audio simulation of how the work actually sounded.
Dear, so sorry for the delay, but I was traveling. I'm also sorry for not getting back in touch with you. I telepathically sent you a message, but not a real one. Machine. Dear, sorry for the delay again, but we are very short-staffed right now with a departure, a death, and a birth.
So there were phrases like, I'm sorry for my late reply, but I was so frustrated with Trump becoming the president. Or, I'm sorry for my late reply, I was stuck in a battle with the windmills of my past mistakes. Or, I'm sorry, I don't see why I should have an apologize. I have friends, family, and you're not a priority. Or something quite earnest, you know, I'm sorry for my late reply, my father just passed away at the age of 53 and I've been away from work for a month and I'm just getting back into it. But it's basically kind of, as you walk through it, you feel this impossibility, or it is about this very different timings of your outside time, timings of your kind of inside production time, thinking time. I mean, if you project it on the art world and artistic practice of sorts. This was a work called ASMR Spa, and I did it together with an artist, Alexander Kutavoy. And it was commissioned for Liverpool Biennial. And basically when I first arrived, they took me to different spaces, and I really liked the space in Blackburn House because it was used to be first school for girls in Liverpool, and now it's education center for women. And when I was talking to Brenda, who was the deputy director at the time, kind of she talked about different things of how women go there, and then by the middle of the year they hit something she called a brick wall. And this is when they feel like they're failing with their course, you know, kids are ill, this is falling apart and they can't do it. And then they send someone to kind of, for them to help them get through that brick wall. And I really like that sort of gentle repair, the space as a gentle repair. And I basically also, after Riga, I wanted to do a work about different experience of time and different experience of artwork. Yeah. In relation to the time you give it. So we decided to do a spa, and you could see this furniture, you can see a cheek, you can see sort of a bit of hair, you can see a bit of a neck. So basically me and Sasha, we've taken this, I don't know, Greek head, which very often students in art schools practice on. When if they have like drawing classes, they would start with that and kept breaking it. And then when we saw good pieces, would sort of confirm them, and he enlarged them into these ginormous bits. So you're lying in a way on a head, you're getting a facial, but you're getting also a story. You're getting a script that is narrated by the performer slash cosmetologist, written by David McDermott. And what Juliet was saying here, it was basically a story about her as a beautician and her skill and how it's appreciated, not appreciated, about the fact that she has mirror synesthesia. So every time she does it, she knows what the person is feeling. And she also narrated a story of how a restorer came because he wanted to get a facial, because he wanted to feel what his artworks felt when he was restoring them, what his paintings felt. And funnily enough, because I interviewed 2 artwork restorers, it's a very similar process, a facial and the painting restoration. And this is how kind of I arrived at that and kind of mentioned it to David. And also she talked about different artworks that disappeared throughout history and work, I don't know, became dust and dust became something else. Because I'm also, I really like this idea of dissolutions, remaking things, recycling things into something else. And we actually even developed a cosmetics line for it with the brand 2211, which was a lot of fun. And it was basically sculptural. There was a cleanser made from clay. There was a toner with, I don't know, silver extracts. There was a scrub with mineral granite. There was a wood massage oil. There was this plaster mask that you would take away as this imprint. And then the last thing was my favorite. It was a cream where main ingredients were cotton extract and linseed oil. And it's basically, if you try to make a moisturizer out of an oil painting, that's what you'll get. So you kind of listen to the stories, go through the sculptural process, and then absorb a painting and leave. And if you couldn't book the facial, you could watch this whole procedure and listen to it in sort of this ASMR voice on the screens in this conceptual spa. This is another work, Raingrowed, and I was really fascinated for a while of how Ahmed Agoud worked with contracts and what a kind of interesting idea it was to make contracts part of the artwork. So this is, it was commissioned by an art fair, Cosmosco, and it was kind of this beautiful heavy object made from dolomite, this mountain with a circular road around it where there's no entry point and exit point. And then there's a public offer, a contract on view, which states that the artist will gift this object of desire of sorts to anyone who commits to building an actual road. And then also there was a budget for building an actual road around the mountain we picked. And I think it came to maybe like €1 million or something like that. It was about 60 million rubles. And this was, and basically for me, it's a work about serious relationships and a proposal that will always float in the air and will never be realized. But also, it's in the middle of the art fair. So it's very much about how artists kind of have to exist here, there in order to make their living and so on. We showed it at the Kaunas Biennial, and I actually really liked how it was exhibited there because it was shown at the train station, kind of as this passing by mountain. This is one of the budgets. I have not too many small objects, but this is one of them, and this is called Caspian Sea, and it's basically an industrial mold for production of silicon molds to bake cakes in the shape of Caspian Sea. So I don't know, if you purchase this object, you have a choice either of producing 10,000 baking shapes, 10, and which each can produce 1,000 actual cakes. So kind of, you know, flooding the world with Caspian Sea cakes, or keep it as this pristine sort of object of value or artistic value. And it also has a small sort of embossing, and which every silicon shape would have, which says Caspian Sea 2018/ongoing unlimited edition. So it's also potentiality of producing crazy amount of unlimited editions. This is, I'll maybe say a few words about it. I think it doesn't translate too well in the video. I think it kind of plays with a delay. So maybe I'll just talk about it. And if you want, I can just send out a link for you to watch it on your own. I think this would be a better way. It's a work called Beide, and it was originally was commissioned by Venice, and then in 2017, and then it was shown at Manifesta in Palermo also. I went to an island called Chechen in Dagestan in the summer of 2016, and I was mesmerized by the stories I was told on the way. And one of the stories was that, I don't know, some people call them bioterrorists or illegal fishermen that fish quite often for sturgeon and for sturgeon caviar, that sometimes when they go out at sea and the storm breaks and, you know, their boat capsizes and stands like this because of the heavy motor, they would tie themselves to the prow of the boat for several reasons. If they lose their mind, so they don't drown themselves, and if they die, so the family finds their body. So this was this cold attitude to death and this consideration of hope as something negative, so the families don't hope for their return and have actual like something to mourn over, was really striking. And once again, I couldn't forget it. I was thinking about a work. I was like, oh, maybe we should bring these fishermen to Venice. Maybe we should bring the boats. But then, thank God, it just felt just fake and spectacularizing. I think that would be a right word. So I've invited Tim Etchels to work with me on the script. He's an amazing artist, an amazing writer. And basically based on our, I don't know, 70 pages of interviews, he wrote this, I don't know, a little bit of a slapstick comedy, but beautiful text of people in the boat in Venice during the opening, trying to find that performance in the sea. So we see somebody filming on their phone and, you know, looking for a boat, and then they find a capsized boat, but then they're disappointed. They're saying like, oh, there's no performers. Maybe it's a different boat. Maybe it's not the boat that we're looking for. But the captain of their boat says, no, the coordinates are correct. So it's kind of, it's about how do we look at artwork institutionally? What is Venice opening like? And what are the stories of lost at sea boats and people? And of course, it also relates to work by forensic oceanography. Like, I guess there's a direct link to that. But yeah, if you want, the link will go around. This is a research material that I don't usually show, but I thought it was just kind of a curious thing to include, because I often go to the Russian State Documentary and Film Archive in Krasnogorsk and just kind of search for things at random very often. And some things emerge that also trigger the beginning of a work.
1942 года. Самодовольные мерзавцы еще не знают, что им готовится в Сталинграде и на Кавказе. В своем бандитском воображении они уже видели тот жирный пирог, который достанется им после похода. Их арийские носы уже чуяли раздражающий запах бакинской нефти, запах неслыханных барышей и военных выгод.
So kind of if you watch this video twice, you see that there's not a single frame of the generals and the cake in the same frame. So it was most likely beautiful dessert chefs of the Soviet Union that came up with this cake. And I found it as such a curious metaphor of geography consumption. So basically what I did, I just reproduced a cake in Uppsala. I think it was actually in Uppsala Museum in a room called the Peace Room. It was quite funny. And I've served it to people based on the country they wanted to consume. And I've also kind of done this cake a couple of times, but this was actually the beginning of my food interests and food projects. This is something I called Artist Menu, called Stomach It, and this was done for VAC Foundation, also in 2017 at Palazzo del Zattere. And it was an exhibition dedicated to 100 years since Russian Revolution, and I wanted to say something about the reality of the people. And basically, I've looked at the history of starvation in the country and everything related to that. There was a bread made from dry leaves and hay, the mention of which I've also found in the same archive that I mentioned before. There was a speaker that a girl had, which had the sound of rumbling empty stomach, and you'd have to come very close to this performer to hear it from the speaker. There was a girl which was serving water, and all of this was accompanied with a brochure. And for example, the water bit had an excerpt from an interview which I conducted with Pir Magomed, who was 91 at the time, and who was in exile in Central Asia, in Kazakhstan. And I went to meet him initially because I heard that the way they survived is because they're I can't say jailer because it was like working camps. So it wasn't exactly the jailer, but something like that. I don't know, supervisor of their working camp was taught them how to eat, how to make turtle soup, because they were Muslims and they couldn't eat any animals without legs. So he taught them how to basically cook turtles. And initially I was interested in that, but then obviously I couldn't serve turtles in Venice. And generally, I think I can't serve turtles. But then at some point I asked him if they had some juices or compots or like boiled berry drinks, and he was like, "Daughter, we just wanted enough water to drink." So it's also my own lack of understanding of what that reality was really like. So I included my question and his answer, and just she was serving water. Then there was, these are some excerpts from the brochure. And there was a girl who was serving edible food stamps, because since 1917, people only received bread. They couldn't buy bread. They would only receive it with the food stamps. And for example, the allowance for traders, clergy, and housewives under the age of 56 was 0 grams. There was a smell commissioned to Ilya Nastenko, who was a perfumer. So there was a sort of a casserole, completely empty, and you open it and you smell it, and it's a smell of fatty soups, because a lot of people, especially during siege of Leningrad, were dreaming about smells, of like food smells. And then there was also, we were trying to exchange coal for jewelry if people would take it, because a family in Dagestan in the 30s survived because of their grandmother, that she would sometimes change her diamonds for bread and for coal in order to keep the family warm. And then there was also a lollipop in the shape of Lenin's head with a chewing gum inside. You sort of, I don't know, suck on power, change the face of power, chew the power's brain. And there was a small ribbon that said, "New revolutionary lollipop with the chewing gum inside, give shape to the leader's brain," something like that. You might have seen this work. I won't focus on it too much, just show a tiny excerpt. So Rasul Abakarov, he takes across the whole copies of the whole, I guess, subjective history of art of Dagestan, which we selected based on the article by Jamila Dagirova, and it's which was the first and I guess the only overview of the Dagestani history of art in this fuller version. And it was a work about how certain histories sort of slip into cracks, and also how scared you are as an artist to say something, how many doubts you have, and how much you're afraid if it's going to enter history or enter that side of the mountain or not. Yeah, just to say it briefly. And these are the photos from Rasul's family archive, because it's a dynasty of tightrope walkers, and I just really love them. And I think one of the reasons I was really happy that Moose Publishing, together with VC, published a book on tightrope was because we could include these archival films. Like, that's his great grandfather walking on a tightrope between two moving trucks. Like, can't get any better to my mind. Another part of the work grew out of my encounter at the circus school in Dagestan, in Dagagni. And because I saw this pyramid, and I also started thinking about how can I do also performance with the same collection. And this is how the performance came into place, which was called On the Benefits of Pyramids in Cultural Education, Strengthening of National Consciousness, and the Formation of Moral and Ethical Guideposts. And we've done it together with the circus students in Moscow. And it was also similar ideas, body as a support structure for art history. And I think in my mind also it was part dedicated to the staff and the collection keepers at the Dagestani Museum of Fine Art, where we worked with a lot and where we've selected the works and made copies of the works. This was at Van Abe, and it was a, I don't know, mini solo show of sorts, which was called Storeroom, and it was actually dedicated to Dagestani Museum of Fine Art. And as you enter, you see this film from 1967 as sort of a pretext, but not as my work, just as kind of research material or something that stayed with me, that triggered the work. Because Van Abe and Mukha, they share all the works that were in the video. And I guess Van Abe collects in the same way. They collect artistic collections. So it made a lot of sense. And they also hold one edition of the video for the exhibition. And actually, now that I look at this photo, the performance of the pyramid performance, it now lives as photographic wallpaper. So kind of some things I know what they can become, sometimes I don't, but with that particular work, I felt that it can't be a video documentation or performance. It makes more sense, for example, as wallpapers. We've exhibited all the works from the video, and also Van Abe commissioned a performance for which we made these structures. And in the performance, there was actually one collection keeper, tools participating, and two of the I think volunteers from the museum, which was actually really nice to work with someone who was sort of very much involved with Van Abe. And that performance was based on the interviews with collection keepers, which didn't get into the book, but I felt that their voices and their choices and their appreciation of the collection. And it's basically kind of people working for, I don't know, €100 salaries, clearly not for money, but just out of love and admiration for all these artworks, which I have a lot of admiration to. There was another work shown there called Way of an Object, which is also dedicated to that museum, and I'll just say a few words about it. It's actually in the collection of Mukha, so sometimes I think they exhibit it also. It was puppets, because since I saw Cabaret Crusades by Wael Shawki, I was really fascinated by puppets. And also one of my favorite people is Ronnie Burkett, who's this amazing, amazing puppeteer in Canada. if in case you want to have a look. And basically, I've picked 3 objects from the Dagestani museum, like this bracelet, which is made in Kubachi village, and it's a wedding bracelet that you wear only once in your lifetime when you get married, and it's passed on from the mother to daughter. And then a salt box, which you usually buy without a design, and then as an owner, you carve out a design, and it's some sort of ritualistic opening of the eyes of the object, and becomes this, I don't know, little pagan godlike figure. But also salt being the main preservative in the mountains, and also kind of, for example, this particular design is a swirl or a labyrinth for bad spirits to get lost in. So they're very alive, this decorative and applied arts object. And then another thing was Gamayun, the prophetic bird by Viktor Vasnetsov, which ended up in the collection from Sava Morozov's collection. And originally, I think it was in Tretyakov Gallery, and then it was sent to Dagestan because there was this program in the Soviet Union of sending important artworks and important artists to regional museums. So everyone across USSR would have this equal access to so-called high culture. And these puppets, originally, first iteration I've made them, it was just a box with puppets and short text. Then I thought that's not enough because I wanna give them a voice. I don't wanna leave them voiceless as they are in the museum. So then we created a performance, and Andrei Koreshkov wrote a text for them, and it was performed at the opening and on several days as well. And then later on, we made it into an audio. So now it's an audio piece that you can listen to when you're in the exhibition. And we end with one of my favorite people, or maybe a parallel life of mine. And basically it's Super Taos. And I mentioned her a little bit before, who appeared and came to life when I met Super Sohrab in Tehran. And also, it's like, I really like this quote by Hannah Arendt, that in dark times we have no choice but to become light sources ourselves. And she appeared also, I think, in kind of in a difficult moment, I guess, for me politically, and she was just someone who just does it. And we'll just watch a short viral video, which is possible to download on my Vimeo account, because like if you'd like to own it or share it on WhatsApp, because also that's the life of the video that needs to happen in this case, because it needs to be disseminated, shared, it needs to appear on different strange platforms. And I think her life is also an homage to a lot of my female relatives in Dagestan who just kind of do stuff. And I think it's also curious how different alter egos exist. And my friend Dasha Khan once asked me, so when she's not here, where is she? And I said, like, oh no, she's living her life. She's living her life in Dagestan. She's married, she works in a kindergarten, she has her own family, she's building a house now. So it's a parallel thing. I mean, for some artists, alter egos is someone you download from Cosmos or you become, or you, and for me, it's like this, I don't know, potentially a life I should have had, or a life that I'm having parallel. But yeah, it's an existence which coincides. And for example, she doesn't consider what she does as artwork because she's not an artist. She calls it life affirming practices. So there's a whole there's a way of understanding of what she's doing and how she's living her life. And this is just an example of how things come back. This was a video from 2010, which was called Endeavor, where I push a rock for 9 minutes and nothing happens. And then 4 years later, Superhouse appears. And this self-enabling takes place. Not my work, but one of my favorite works by Galina Konopatskaya, Cosmic Mother from the 70s. And I think it's a really incredible work. And I see this woman in the painting as some sort of predecessor of Superhouse. Another life-affirming practice by her, which is called Untitled 2, and it basically relates to a story which she and I found out, that in the 90s there was an attempted theft of a Rodchenko painting from one of the museums in Dagestan, where a thief cut out a painting, a canvas from the frame, and started running. And two invigilators, Maria Karkmasova and Khamisat Abdullaeva, stopped him. And somehow took it back. But none of the newspapers mentioned their names. They mentioned that the police stopped him, or that another newspaper, I think, mentioned that it was one male worker from the museum which stopped it. But I interviewed him and he said he didn't, it was the woman. And then Khamisat also, who was still alive when I interviewed her for potentially this project, she also said that Maria, stopped him, she told her, and so on. So it was also a way of excavating that story. And Superhouse did a monument, bronze monument, to the two of them, and tried to place it within different spaces. And this is at Pompidou. This is a sketch, because also Dagestan has a lot of monuments named to specific men, but to women, it's more of a, I don't know, a mother, a teacher, more generic role monuments, let's put it that way. And this is in Dagestan. And this is another life-affirming practice of hers called Quick Fix. Basically commissioned for an art fair for Armory show, but for a curated section by Sally Talent. And Super Taos didn't really trust anyone to make her booth. So she made this traveling case, which she just brought in and then erected in the art fair space. And the practice was that you could throw a dice, anyone could throw a dice, and it would either be yes or no. And if yes, you get a trophy, and she prints a label of any competition that you ever wanted to win, and you take it away. So Quick Fix. And the last work that I'll show, because I think it rhymes with the aerostatic experience, it rhymes with maybe Super Taos and other things that and threads through other things that we've seen kind of in terms of structures that I'm interested in. Yeah. It's basically, I guess, two brides or bride and a groom that navigate wedding halls in Dagestan, searching for each other, for comfort, for, I don't know, the future, the potentiality of the future. And yeah, this is the last thing. We'll watch a 3-minute excerpt and then we'll go on to questions. I think they're also, in a way, maybe walking napkins or parts of the space that came alive. And want to play hide and seek. And I just wanted to say that basically you can ask me anything. I don't know how the studio is structured, how projects come about, what is the money logistics, like everything you've ever been ashamed to ask, you can do this now.
Right, so maybe I will start with asking uncomfortable questions. But thank you very much, Tao. It was really so nice to see all the work you made and the diversity of it. I think it's really inspiring. A question I have, it was something I didn't really realize before, but also because you talked a lot about where the, let's say, the art world's dynamics. So how you are dealing with like the first work, the commissioned by Frans Mazereel Center, that you're making an unlimited edition, more or less. Then you're talking about the provenance in Lausanne. You're dealing with this. You did a survey in the museum. You're questioning the value of artworks. Then, of course, BIDA as well. You're interested in the artist contract. So somehow I realized we're really dealing with, let's say, the market dynamics in a way. You're playing with them, you're commenting on them, but of course you also need those dynamics, of course, or some of those elements. So I was wondering if you maybe can elaborate a little bit how you see yourself positioning in those contexts.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for a very acute observation. But I don't know if your question is how I survive within all of these games.
No, it's just if you can elaborate a bit on your interest in playing with this. And because there is like the idea you're dealing with cultures, you're dealing with myths in your works, like all these things, but then there's also, let's say, the myth of the art world you are playing with very much, which was something I didn't really realize before.
I think I've always been interested in the edges of the body or system, and kind of wiggling. I love wiggling systems, and I don't know, trying to push in a way. Like the work is not, it is not, but it is very body oriented. It is very much about testing edges, pushing things, pressing against the edges, seeing how far you can go, even how far you can go in production when you work with people, and seeing what happens when the body is pushed to its limit. And it can be a body of an institution. It doesn't have to be a physical body. Mm-hmm. So like, I guess it's always, first of all, I guess Goldsmith gave me this terrible but productive anxiety of doubting everything, which sort of manifests in this obsessive doubting, but which allows you to arrive somewhere further than you could have if you just kind of stuck to initial thing that you thought about. So yeah, I think it's testing the borders of institutions that interest me a lot, because I'm just not interested in taking things as they are. Like, why would you do that? Why would you not try to push the rules, change the rules, and see if you can amend them and just, I don't know, see a different see different workings and different machines.
Mm-hmm. Because of course there is maybe some critique in it, like some institutional critique, or maybe more some art world critique, but it's in a very playful and maybe not that heavy way.
Yeah, I mean, I love humor. I really believe in humor, and I hope it came across. I mean, it's difficult to do talks like that on Zoom, a little bit difficult, because you don't see faces, you don't hear reactions, you don't kind of hear if somebody laughs at what you're saying. So I hope you were, some of you were at least. So I think it's an amazing tool, and I'm interested in this second thought after you laugh in this, like, what did I just laugh at? It's like, it's like, I'm interested in this also, like questioning why do you find this funny and what you find funny. And in terms of institutional critique, I remember, I think maybe my BA dissertation or one essays where I think it was called institutionalization of institutional critique. So I think it's not like, you can't say like anymore that it's an institutional critique because it's so absorbed by the institution. Like I am very much an institutional artist. I am sort of a biennial artist, and I wiggle things from the inside. And I think I think it's fine. For me, it's fine to wiggle things from the inside, because to me, the choices, they always come from considering the audience. The choice to participate in the show is always a decision because of the audience. Even though like I'm a little bit sick and tired of showing tightrope because it's traveled to so many exhibitions, I still wouldn't say no if a small biennial in Turkey approaches me, because I know that the audience there would not make it to Venice, would not make it like to Manifesta, or would not make it to somewhere where the work circulated already. So kind of my choices are always for people to see the work and the works to travel.
And of course, this maybe has also something to do with your background, like the Dagestan background, so to say.
Yeah.
And the museum that's there. We have some questions. I hope I pronounce the name in the right way. It's I think it's Chanel Delmotte. How do you come up with the titles for your artworks, and how important are they to you?
So some of the artists I don't even come up with, to be completely honest. Like, for example, a title, Quantitative Infinity of the Objective. It was my project manager came up with this because he was reading a book on how sports developed in schools. And he said, oh, this is an amazing phrase, which means when sports stops being a game and becomes something, a result which is unattainable, quantitative infinity of the objective, you can never be good enough. And for example, the work, The Pyramids, this was a title, and it was, and somebody else came up with it, a good friend of mine, Alexei Maslyaev, who's a curator. So sometimes it's me, sometimes it's other people. And of course, like for example, with Pyramids, it's a hilarious, super funny title. And it adds a little bit of humor to it, but it also hints at the system, at the Soviet museum system, and generally as the Soviet sort of sports system, body system. And actually we had a bet with Alexei at some point, and he lost me. And he lost something which I'm quite happy about. I said that you will have to, until the end of your life, you'll have to come up with titles for my works. So I have this pass to call him every time I need a title. I don't do it, but yeah. I guess I should, like, I usually acknowledge this in talks. Today I forgot, but maybe it should be acknowledged and more of a star thing. But kind of texts, conceptual texts about the works we always acknowledge, but maybe that's something actually. Thank you for the question. I need to think about that more.
Yeah, we have two questions that are a little bit similar, so I will read them together. When you start an artwork, do you always have a strict plan to work from, or do you let the artwork grow from itself? Do you let coincidence have a role in the progress of making? And the other question, which I think is quite similar by Anne Burvenich, is every work thought through in advance, or can it change on the road?
So I don't have a plan. I think my studio would want me to have a plan, but it's not always the case. Like, for example, with Mining Serendipity, also I tend to get excited. With Mining Serendipity, I think it was meant to be one pendant on a chain. And then I was like, no, it's getting somewhere else. Like, I want a segmented chain because that doesn't, like an ordinary chain doesn't work. And then it should be like many, no, like 5 is not enough, like not 1. So I think the work grows and it always changes. Like I really start from tiny things. I want, like, I propose something small, and this is also kind of feeds back into that. Sometimes I don't estimate my fees well enough because the amount of work is here, fees like slightly less. But I mean, some institutions are kind enough actually to adjust it later, seeing how much work was put in. But yeah, there's no plan, I think. And it's, as I said, I start with like, just like with Baku, for example, I came back and I asked my researcher to, or research that we outsource right now, to look into cosmetics from crude oil, urban myths in Baku. For example, a lion that a family kept in their flat, also in Azerbaijan, cave paintings. So it was just like this whole world that I was curious about. And then while looking at it, I narrowed it down to circus. And then the work starts evolving. I know I want to play with scale. I invite an architect, we build something together in 3D. Then I invite a costume maker, then parallel worked with a writer. We send him all our research, then he comes back with a draft, then we discuss, and so on and on. So it forms and it changes within. And I think it's absolutely natural for it to change. I mean, I sometimes find myself going back to something I thought about briefly at the very beginning, and I was like, oh, maybe it can be that. And then kind of my research and my pondering confirms that I should go back to that and dig that. But that's not always the case. Sometimes along the way, I find something else which sort of flourishes. Coincidence, yes, there are findings, there are accidental findings, and I think also it's very important to allow your team or your collaborators to have their say and to allow their expertise to become part of the work, because it's yeah, because like the people I encounter and the stories they tell me are incredible, and they're very often in the works.
Because maybe also to elaborate a little bit on that, like you have not a huge studio, but still I think it's a big studio, huh? And then if I remember a couple of years ago, you were in the Liverpool Biennial, you were in the Lyon Biennial, I think Manifesta was more or less the same time, and Riga, which were all very diverse projects. It were big exhibitions, then you had institutional shows. So I'm wondering, like, these ideas were so diverse. It's not, and do you have a big stable of ideas that you can pick from? Like, how do you start this to do so many different things?
I have no idea. No, actually, just to mention, if anyone is curious, I saw a beautiful studio tour by Ryan Gander, and I think it's on in his stories on Instagram. And for example, in his studio, he has his own room. Obviously, I mean, everything is his, but he has his own like workroom study where all his ideas are printed on the walls around him. I don't have that. And I don't have like a pool of ideas. I mean, I have some ideas which are realized not in relation to an exhibition, but very lately it's been sort of commissioned. Because like when things are commissioned, you know, you have a budget, you have a fee. It's not like you don't sort of fundraise separately for a project. So working parallel, I think basically it became, I guess, I am excited and in a way greedy to make more art, because what happened to me after Venice, I was climbing there thinking, oh my God, this is the Mount Olympus. This is the epiphany of my career. This is it, I've made it. So I climbed there and then I got depressed because nothing changed. And it was a bit of a, yeah, basically just nothing inside me, nothing, not much outside. And I was like, oh, damn. And then I started thinking about my art making not as a series of institutional steps to climb there, but as a license and a mark of potentiality and a possibility to experiment. And that's what I'm doing with every work. I'm so lucky to be able to experiment with forms, ideas, and I don't know, connotations. So I think I went somewhere a little bit far with your question. Wait, I need to go back. What was it again?
No, it was just how you're able to do
parallel. Yeah,
the diverse projects.
So in a way, it became, because I'm not I don't have like I'm not bought by private collectors a lot, because I think it's also like, it's a different type of effort. And I haven't like, I can't say that my career was built by galleries. I think I just worked a lot. I had some good relationships with Laura Boulian, Lori Shabibi, Narrative Projects, galleries, and they've done kind of important things for my career, but I don't share that thing which I often see young artists kind of thinking about and aspiring, that, you know, if you have like an important gallery, that's it, your career is made. Because to me, it was just a very different path. It was kind of, in a way, I'm like a biennial artist, institutional artist, and I don't very often disseminate my work through art fairs, for example, which is not a very bad platform, because art fairs, well, now I'm not sure, but these were the places that used to have money, and kind of curators would come and do their research in the art fairs. So so in the way I survive financially is through artist fees for commissions and sometimes sales. So in order to make my practice sustainable and to support my studio, I have to do parallel projects. I have to do a lot of exhibitions. I have to, you know, just send works and not travel and allow them to be shown. I have to gently bargain for fees when I'm offered like something for an exhibition. I say like, thank you so much. But in order to make my practice sustainable, I had to standardize my fees. And this would be great if you can offer this. And most of the times people do, because like, all artists, they have different presence in the market. Some of them are doing incredibly well and they don't care if it's a 2,000 or 4,000 fee for a biennial. I do, because like the practice is different. It's institutional, fees are important, and so on. So parallel thing is a necessity. But for example, that moment that you're referring to, it was actually, there was Liverpool, there was Riga, there was Manifesta. Thank God Manifesta was an existing work. And there was also a biennial in China at the time, which I forgot the name of, unfortunately. It was created by Marco Scattini. This was also existing work. So I had to divide, like I went to two places, to Riga and to install, and to Liverpool, and my assistant went to like, to install in China. So
Lyon was 2019.
Yeah, Lyon, no, this was
2018.
Lyon was later, 19. I think Lyon it wasn't too packed. It was Lyon and then Superhero Sighting Society. I think it was okay. Oh, there was Mishwara, but that was existing work, and I couldn't go to the opening, so I just actually came for the closing, which was a beautiful biennial curated by Anka Ryu and Maria Lind. It was really special. And yeah, so it's a pleasure, but it's also a necessity for me. And with Riga and with Liverpool, these works were, I mean, they were realized kind of close, but they were in production for like a year. Liverpool was like for a year and a half. I was thinking about it. I was doing it and methodically working on it. And Riga kind of a bit of a shorter span. But for example, with Riga, part of the production was in Moscow. The tripods were produced in Riga. They had amazing kind of production team. Liverpool also, a lot of the things, like me and Sasha and his friend Anton, we three of us went to Liverpool to make these sculptures. I mean, I was just kind of a courier girl, I would say. I couldn't be making them because I don't know how to. Yeah, because shipment was impossible. And Sasha agreed to go for 2 weeks to make that incredible installation. So yeah, you could sort of make ways and plan things. But in terms of the structure of the studio, very long answer to one question. It's right now it grew. At the time, it was only one assistant. Now I have a studio director who's full-time, project manager who's full-time, an archivist, and 2 assistants, which are part-time. It's very precarious, but I'm doing what I can because like I really love being able to do multiple projects and kind of work on multiple things and kind of juggle things around as a circus acrobat.
So another question is, where can we buy the Mining Serendipity?
It's on their website of the Franz Messeril Centrum. Just, yeah, go click and it will be delivered.
Well, it's an anonymous attendee, so maybe someone is trying to make a bit of advertisement. That's also possible. So then Emma, so thank you very much, I guess, for the inspiring lecture. We had some good laughs. I have a few questions. Is this interest for the art market something you only in the last year got interested in, or is it something you have been interested in your whole career? Something that I really noticed was that you collaborate a lot with other artists. How do you come to find them, and how do you build these relationships?
So
Two questions.
yeah, so the art market, I don't know, art market maybe.
Mechanisms is maybe a better.
Yeah, so art market mechanisms, I don't know, maybe last 5 years or so, I mean, maybe, but also I'm kind of saying it on top of my head right now. Before, I think I was interested in systems. Even Tightrope is interested in institutional systems. And earlier on, it was more sort of poetic systems that I was tackling on. Yeah, I think that's a short answer. Collaborate with other artists. How do I find them? I get in touch. Like, honestly, I just, with Sasha, I loved his sculptures and just his works. And I just basically messaged him. With Tim Etchells, I've been to his lecture once. And I sort of like thought that he would be amazing to work with. And I just kind of like got his email. I can't even remember of who, and emailed him absolutely at random, like super nice email explaining that I'm doing this for Venice and it'll be amazing and I love his work, because he was the one that wrote a script for Elm Green and Drax at Drama Queens. I really like that work. I think it's amazing. It's like copies of important 20th century sculptures that have a conversation like in it as a theater play. So out of the blue, we Skyped. He said yes. He like, it was I could afford like a sort of okay fee because of, like, with the budget we had. So mostly it's just like that. And for example, David McDermott, the writer we worked with, it was so like, this was like real serendipity, because basically I just met him in Berlin at a bar, and a friend of mine said, well, I mean, it was a friend of a friend. And a friend of mine said like, oh, he's really amazing writer. But I haven't like, and this was like, I don't know, maybe 3 years before. And then in Liverpool, I was like, ooh, who can I write? I was like, should I look up that guy? Like, for some reason I thought, and I messaged him. He's in Liverpool then, because he was from Liverpool, which I did not remember. I look at his stuff and I realized that even though he was writing for TV drama, like, I feel like this is the guy that can be flexible, that we can have conversation with, that is very, I don't know, empathetic, feminist in his own way. So yeah, and it's, I mean, in terms of building a relationship, I guess it's always a friendly relationship. And you ask, what are they happy with? Like, how do they want to be credited? It's always like, for a project, even if I don't pay, I pay collaborators, and then later, whatever, if the work sells, or if I show it somewhere else, I'll get like a fee through that. So this is important. Yeah, I think I hope.
But I can also imagine that it's, because now it's that you have an idea for a project and you find someone to collaborate with, more or less. But I can imagine, for example, as the rope dancers, that you find out about this family, and that you, with this family in mind, start thinking about this work. So it's more maybe the other way around. Or
with Tightrope, it was actually, I was horrified by something that happened, because I found out that one of the museums in Dagestan was forced to move into a new building within like 1 week. And I was like, oh my God, but works during wars are evacuated for a longer time. How can this be done? How can sort of culture be a servant like to the state's whims and desires? So this was actually kind of my annoyance and anger. And then I visualized this tightrope between two museums in the city. But thank God I decided to move it into the landscape. So I had this vision of like danger, precarity, works being on the edge of destruction. And then I started looking for tightrope walker. So Malika, she went to a festival of tightrope walkers in the village Tsovkra, where all the tightrope walkers come from. And then I found that film, and I found that family. And then I kind of, I think it was Batya Ataeva, another assistant that I had at the time, who got in touch with Rasul. And kind of later, I think even later, we realized that he was the descendant of that family whose film I saw and I thought about. So it was, yeah, it's kind of.
It really comes together so well. it's almost too good to be true.
I mean, I like CV narrates much better than when you live it. It's like I narrated better. Like you don't see the doubts and the turmoils and things like it. Like when things are narrated briefly, they always seem magical, but it's it's not always magical.
Yeah. So the last question I have here is by Naomi. So she writes, I first want to thank you. So thank you, Taus. My question is, which advice do you have for me as an aspiring performance artist, but also for an aspiring artist?
Archive well. Archive everything well. And just, yeah, now I'm just trying to structure my archive, and I find things that have never, like works that we left at art center. Like there was one work which we left for 6 years at an art center. Thank God we emailed them and they sent it straight away. So one thing is archive well, but then again, like I think I remember a moment when nobody would invite me anywhere, and I've decided not to focus my energy on, I don't know, open calls on fundraising or searching for funding, but just making works with whatever means I could. And to me, like that choice into work making and working on your practice is also it's always the most important. And I like to narrate the story that, you know, the way I ended up in Venice is because Christine Marcel, she came to Laurie Shabibi Gallery and she saw a tightrope there. And she invited me because she liked the work. There was no, you know, schmoozing or anything. There was no like extra strange workings within the art world. Of course, I was perhaps in the right place when she was visiting Dubai and the work was shown. So there was a moment that the work was seen. But then I'm a real, perhaps partly naive believer that the work has to do the work. Your artworks kind of does it. If you put time and just, yeah, if you fight sincerely for it and in it. I know that's very sobby. I'm sorry.
No, but I think it's like it's 9 o'clock, and I think this is the perfect good night. It's a perfect sentence to end with, I think.
I'm really looking forward to the studio visit. So yeah, we can look at your practice and yeah. So.
Yeah, so Taus, thank you very much. I said earlier, I think it was really inspiring, and like we saw so much humor and maybe more important, so much joy in your work, and I really loved Super Taus so much, and we'll be on the watch out to see where Super Taus will go to. So thank you very much, and I feel really sad we cannot put our hands together for you. Otherwise, we would give you a big applause. Thank you, and hopefully we stay in touch.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation again, and thank you for everyone attending. Have a good night. Bye.